Good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot for inviting us over here and for the introduction. Yeah, it's going to be very hard because it's going to be the fourth presentation about the ERC scheme, so it's very difficult to come up with something new here. Because in fact, ERC is very simple. You need only two things: be good and have luck, right? And so, and I can really assure you that the second part is very important from my own experience. As a former ERC grantee, you also need to have a bit of a luck here. So I'm just going to add just a few personal maybe remarks about the scheme from my own hands-on experience. First of all, I've been a grantee, but I also served on the ERC panel. So my first recommendation to you, if you get invited to the panel, please accept the invitation, because I don't think there is a better training for you to get an ERC grant than just going through the hundreds of applications every call. So highly recommend it. Do this. It definitely worked for me. If you get an invitation, however, if you get an invitation to the ERC Scientific Council, never accept that invitation, because then you won't be able to submit for the 6 years of your active role on the council plus 2 additional years. So for 8 years, you're doomed. The other remark here is, when you prepare your application, don't try to impress the members of the scientific council. I mean, the people in the suits and the pointy shoes you see here, because they cannot help you to get your publication through, your application through. Do not try to impress the executive agency, because these people have enough on their plate, and again, they have no means how to help you to get the submission through. The people you have to impress are the people on the panels and the external reviewers, which are basically your peers. So when you write this application, think of the people who are reviewing your papers in physical review letters, in science. These people, when you're trying to impress these people, it's basically the same thing, it's the same game. You saw this several times, but maybe what you didn't see before were these numbers highlighted in bold here. So this is the amount of funding you can get from the individual schemes here. And what I emphasize is that besides the basic ceiling, there is also a top-up. You can get an extra 1 million on your grant if you justify it properly. And one of the proper justification here is that if you are moving from outside Europe and you want to get something that Barbara did. And I think this is particularly important for us from the EU 13 countries. So another recommendation for me, in fact, this is exactly what I did in my scientific path and career, is go abroad. Go to the States, go to Japan, go to Korea, South Korea preferably. And then do your postdoc, do your junior research there, get a splash. They know very well how to make a splash in the United States. They know what that means. And then apply for the ERC grant. And when you apply for the ERC grant from Korea or from the United States, ask for the top-up, because you need to start a new group back in Poland. And in that case, very likely you will get it. While if you are already in Poland, and everybody knows that Poland, like Czech Republic, got these huge structural funds, there's a lot of new infrastructure, a lot of new equipment, and you say, well, I need this 1 million for another routine equipment, you could get in trouble, because the panel might think that actually this is a piece of equipment which routinely exists already in your environment. So the mobility is really an important thing. Then we've already seen that there is this interesting synergy grant schemes, and it was kind of hinted that, don't try for that because it's too competitive, right? I think maybe it's to some extent the other way around for us from this EU 13 countries, because many people in the EU 13 countries are in fact excellent scientists, but what they might not be too good at is in self-promoting, in being very confident in presenting themselves as being the big shots, right? So in this department, you can get some help from your peers from the EU 15 countries who are equally good. You have to be fantastic scientists, there's no question about it, but maybe they can help you a little bit in that department into this brutal self-promoting part, which to some extent is important. You have to be confident, and you have to show confidence when writing your proposal. There's been also a remark about the administrative forms, and very briefly that within those administrative forms there is some sort of a host institution statement about the support of your proposal. Well, in fact, this statement is very important, and sometimes some institutions, that when they looked at the statement, they have a problem. In particular, in countries like our countries, at least some years ago, this could have been a problem for them, because there is a little note in that statement that these grants are portable. And if you decide to change your host institution, they should support you in that move. So, you know, the fight for ERC grantees, that doesn't end with the submission of the proposal. Actually, you have to fight for the grantee even more once the proposal has been granted. It also tells you that, you know, this is one of the things. ERC is trying to support individual scientists, not institutions. So it's also for you to look for the best institutions, obviously in Poland, that would give you the best working conditions to perform. About the evaluation, again, we already went through this, but a couple remarks. One thing that has not been too much emphasized here is that if you get a score B or C in the first round, if you get a B, you're out from competition for 1 year. If you get a C, you are out for 2 years. So here the advice is, you might have a brilliant idea, but maybe it's too fresh. Maybe you didn't have time yet to transfer that brilliant idea into a proper proposal, because these two things are not the same thing necessarily. It can be really brilliant, but maybe you have not thought it through enough, or you didn't simply have the time to formulate the idea in a way that it will be understandable for the panel members and for the external reviewers. So I think because of this, it's very important to let others have a look at your proposals, others who already have some hands-on experience with ERC, but definitely not the active panel members. This would be really a breach of law, but anyone who is a grantee or is a former panel member, please look for them, and you have now many means in the Poland, I understand, which is fantastic. Go there and check with them whether they think that not only the idea is brilliant, not only your track record is already up to the standard, but the proposal itself is already mature enough, because otherwise you would be out of the game for 1 or 2 years, and that this is really not good, because I said in the beginning, you also need to have some luck, which also means that sometimes you simply have to reapply just to beat the statistics. There are many good proposals and many good people who simply don't get it because of luck and lack of enough resources. Now, this resubmission, these relatively strict resubmission rules, those were not imposed by the panels. Here you can really blame the Scientific Council here. But trust us, this was not introduced to humiliate people who were not found to have top-notch proposals. It was really mostly because of practical reasons, because the Scientific Council wants to maintain the success rate above 10%. We think that if the success rate falls well below 10%, it really turns into a lottery, independent of how sophisticated your evaluation process is. So the resubmission rules have been introduced at the times where the success rate was starting to drop dangerously below 10%, and this was a measure how to counteract this trend. And we are very happy that now the success rate in all calls is typically above 10%. Something happened with that bar here, which didn't show like this on my computer, so it really didn't drop. I mean, just think of it being shifted upwards in 2018. Well, so you made it to the second round, and then you have to go to the interview if you're starting in a consolidated grant applicant. And here I want to emphasize something that was already hinted by Barbara, that the Scientific Council decided to introduce interviews from 2021 also for the advanced grant applicants. Now you might wonder, why did that happen, right? So it was actually prompted by an initiative or by remarks from the research community in the EU 13 countries. Because there's been a perception that some of the panel members may not consider the ideas enough. They may not give them enough time to think, or simply discard because the people are not coming from the top institutions. And these people were frustrated because the comments may not be scientifically correct or fully justified, and they felt that they didn't have the way how to rebut, how to try to counter-address those negative comments from the panels or from the reviewers. While others, like the consolidator or the starting grantees, they do have the chance because they can answer questions during the interview. So because of this, the Scientific Council decided to introduce interviews also for the advanced grants. So this is one of the more, let's say, official versions of this, why that happened. Now off record, I think this is recorded, but you can cut it later. Off record, this has been really one of the things introduced by the EU 13 mafia on the council. Because imagine those rich, well-off senior scientists from the EU 15 countries suddenly having to travel to Brussels, right? Well, they don't have to do it because they have enough money. But people from EU 13 countries, right, they would happily travel. In fact, years ago, we could not travel at all. So whenever we can travel, we're excited. So yes, this was a mean undertone of this that may give a little more chances for the EU 13 countries to be successful in advanced grants, where in fact in advanced grants the success rate is even lower than for the junior ones. But of course, the official version of the thing is we have interviews for the starting, for the consolidator, for the synergy. So in fact, advanced grant was an exception, and we wanted to get rid of that exception. Okay, so how should the starting or consolidator grant applicant profile look like? I'm not going to go through this again because Barbara went through this just a few minutes ago. But one thing what I want to emphasize is the little line at the bottom of the slide here, which again is the unofficial one. As you see, this is we are given these official slides which we are supposed to talk about, and then we add little things here, which we maybe are not supposed to talk about. But I will ask our president later on. But what I'd like to emphasize here is that, and this is again very important for us from the EU 13 countries, don't talk about your weaknesses. Talk about your strength. The panel members may not even notice that you didn't get the Nobel Prize yet, okay? If you just told the panel that you got 2 fantastic plenary lectures at the major conferences. So this is a little bit of a problem of us, that we are overconsumed with our weaknesses. We are obsessed sometimes even that we're not competitive, we're not good enough. Maybe it's good, you know, for our personal development. It's good to have some, you know, some feedback, self-feedback and things like this, but it's not good when preparing grant applications. It's really counterproductive, okay? So focus on your strength. Then there's another question. We hear this quite often from the scientific community, is once you pass the consolidator threshold, you're really out of the game, because then you have to compete with the big shots for the advanced grants. Now, it's really not showing in the numbers. And one of the reasons why it is not showing in the numbers is that these big shots, for them, it should not really matter what they did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It only matters, or it only should matter for the panels, what these guys did in the past 10 years. But once you are out of the consolidator bracket, you should already have a strong track record over your past 10 years. So you should be really competitive. And the panel members are really, overall, they're smart enough that they would not compare the Hirsch index of someone who is just 13 years after PhD with someone who is 30 years after PhD. It's simply not happening in the panels. And the track record that really matters is how active the applicant's been over the past 10 years. And so here are the numbers. This is the success rate of people plotted as a function of their academic age, meaning after their PhD. You see there are random fluctuations, but there is certainly no drop in the success rate, no systematic drop when you're out of the consolidated bracket and when you're entering the advanced grants. So don't be worried, just apply even when you get more than 12 years after PhD. Here is a slide about the Synergy Grant, and I wonder whether I wanted to say something specific about the Synergy Grant, because I already mentioned that that the Synergy Grant, I think, is really an interesting scheme, in particular for the EU 13 countries, and I think it's also in the context of the next framework program. Because in this framework program, and in particular in the previous framework program, there were these consortia grants for fundamental or for bottom-up research. Even in this framework program, we had this FET Open research and innovation action, which was also for frontier fundamental research, and where you could participate in larger consortia. But this apparently is not going to happen in the next framework program. So if you want to team up with your colleagues from elsewhere in Europe, synergy grants for bottom-up frontier research, I think synergy grants are pretty much the only options you have. So it's something that you should definitely look into. And also the money is very interesting, by the way. I mean, you can get for the group between 2 and 4, 10 million plus the top-up. So you can really secure a huge amounts of money for pursuing your joint research. More money that you could get from the FET Open, where the limit was 4 million. Okay, so let me conclude with a few remarks from the EU 13 perspective. Because I'm from Czech Republic, so I will compare a little bit the numbers between Czech Republic and Poland here. So in Czech Republic, as you see, first of all, ERC grants are really not, this is not a generic funding agency. It's really hard to get an ERC grant, that's true. But on the other hand, it's very different from a Nobel Prize. I mean, there are already nearly 10,000 ERC grants, so it really tells you a lot. It's enough, statistics to tell you which countries are strong in which, or which regions are strong in which particular research areas. And also it tells you that it's possible to get an ERC grant, where it's virtually impossible to get a Nobel Prize. But the percentage of researchers that get it eventually is a fraction of a percent, is 0.5% on average here, while in Czech Republic it's only 0.1. So it really tells you immediately that we are 5 times worse than the average in EU. And in Poland, you have to downscale it a little bit because we have similar number of grants, but Poland is a few times larger than Czech Republic. And other things that there seems to be a similarity between Czech Republic and Poland is the distribution of the grants is not healthy. In Czech Republic, virtually all grants are located in Prague. And there is one very strong university, Charles University, that really have most of the grants. And then they are kind of spread across the institutes of the academy with about the same number of grants. And I was really surprised how similar this looks like in Poland, where it looks like it's more located around Warsaw. And again, there seems to be one very strong university, and then there are only a couple of grants or a single grant in the rest of the country. And I think this is really not this is for us a disadvantage. And I think here we really should take advantage of the structural funds. I don't know how it was in Poland, but in Czech Republic, money from Europe from structural funds did not go to Prague. Prague is too wealthy. It went elsewhere. So there are many new research institutes and infrastructure elsewhere. And if we want to get the numbers up, there needs to be a more equal distribution of top research institutions across the country. And one thing that I think is really working in Czech Republic, although of course the numbers are not high enough, and something that I saw already in the morning presentation, maybe you are much more, in fact, sophisticated than what we have in place in Czech Republic, but the ideas are very similar, so maybe they are right, because independently people are coming with the same type of ideas, is that you really have to have a systematic ERC pipelines introduced in your institutions and in the country. And I think for you as applicants, you should really take advantage of this, and you should also look into the institutions if you want to apply, whether those institutions have those ERC pipelines implemented and whether they understand what it takes to create a successful ERC applicant and to keep the ERC grantee in the institutions, because they are two things which are connected, but they're also different. So one of the very important thing is is to see if that host institution has dedicated programs for creating and maintaining groups of young scientists that are independent, because that is actually the very important criterion for you to be successful for the starting and consolidated grant, that you have to be able to demonstrate your scientific independence. But if you are forced to live in an environment which is extremely conservative and where there's no way how you can establish your own research program, then you will have very hard time to persuade the panelists that the work that you did, even if you did it really, but if there are no easy ways how to demonstrate that this is your own work, this is the work of your own group, you may have hard time to convince the panel members. So it's very important to look for the institutions which do give you the opportunity to start your own research group as a young scientist, not meaning a postdoc level, but the level which in the United States is called a tenure track. So that means the junior professor level. For the postdocs, I think it's extremely important to go abroad. And so, for example, in Czech Republic, we are now introducing a scheme for self-funded postdocs, for them to go wherever they can secure a postdoc position, preferably in a top European or American or elsewhere in the world institution, so that they can bring their own money. That would make them much easier to find the postdoctoral position in a top institution, and then from there to come back to Europe and make a successful application. Because if you do the postdoc abroad, it's very easy to demonstrate the independence of your PhD advisor if your PhD advisor was back in Poland or in your home country. Then I think it's very important, and this is happening in Czech Republic, and I believe it's also happening massively in Poland, is to have ERC-like funding schemes. And I think for two reasons. First reason is that it gives you an additional training. If you have similar criteria, if you have international panels that evaluate your proposal, even in your own country, it gives the community the proper training for being successful in the ERC. But also, we all know in physical sciences and engineering that you can never live off a single grant, even if that grant is ERC. I don't know how it is in your lab, but in my lab, it's impossible to simply live with just one grant. It's always multiple funding you need. So if you can get a very nice grant from your local funding agency, which is competitive, but which follows the very same principles and ideas as ERC, I think it's a very good training, but also it puts your group in a good position in terms of infrastructure, in terms of your previous performance to be successful. Then there are these ad hoc schemes, which I think could be particularly useful for young researchers. Just if you didn't have the chance before, take advantage of this fellowship to visit ERC grantee with your draft of the proposal. Go there, spend a few months there, look how an ERC group looks like, operates, and make the PI, the ERC PI there, go through your proposal and give you an advice. This, I think, is a very interesting scheme. And then I'm not so sure, but I think you also do have in Poland these programs for unfunded A's or even B's in second round. I don't know if you have it or not. We do have it in Czech Republic. And if I can talk to, the people from the ministry, I guess already left. But my feeling is that this is a complete win-win scenario for us, for the EU 13 countries, because it costs zero money in terms of the evaluation for the local government. All the evaluation, all the hard work is done by the ERC, and you know that the people who got A in the second round, but even the people on our standards who got Bs in the second round, those are typically already the top scientists in the country, and the evaluation has been already done for free. So why not just taking over this evaluation and funding these people? So what we have in Czech Republic, we do fund fully the A's from the second round, so they get the full 5-year funding, and the B's, they get 2-year funding. And the idea here is to keep these people in the country and make them reapply. In fact, there is a condition for this funding to be awarded, is that these guys have to resubmit in at least 2 years periods. So if you want to get the support you have to resubmit. And if you resubmit, if you're successful, of course, you cannot have a double funding. But this is the way how to reward people who already made it to the second round, and also keep the people in the country before they can make a next and hopefully even more successful attempt at ERC. And I think that's nearly all I have. Last slide here. It's been emphasized here already that you guys have a very sophisticated program. We have probably a less sophisticated program in Czech Republic, but we do have one. And it's a hands-on workshop for ERC applicants. Maybe these meetings are useful, I don't know. But what I know is really useful is when people with hands-on experience with ERC grants, that means formal panel members, ERC grantees, top people in the field, look through specific proposals and give you specific advice. So this is the really one-on-one interactions with the people who have hands-on experience with ERC, and they provide feedback to the applicants. I think it's extremely important, and believe me, the successful countries like Netherlands, they have very sophisticated programs to support their applicants, and this is one of the reasons why they are so successful. Thank you.